Welcome back, dear friends, to Highlights on the Book of Action and Reaction. This week, we'll be discussing Chapter 13, Debt at a Standstill. Leo, last chapter we discussed a different case of George, Zilda, and Marina, equally as heart-wrenching and moving. But in this chapter, we are again going to be studying about a new case, right?
Yes, most certainly.
And they start out by, again, going back to Mansell Paz, and someone else, again, approaches Assistant Silas and brings this need for intercession on the case of Pollyanna and her son. Her son Sabino. And it's a very moving case because we see the immediacy, the necessity to go to her home very quickly. And we see that it's so loving in a way because we see that it's so fast, because sometimes we think that when we pray or when we're suffering, it seems like either the help gets there very late or no help is there at all, when in actuality, many times we're being helped from the spiritual side and we don't even know it, right?
Right. And the other teachings that we get from this as well is that when we are called into action, right, to help someone, that we should also act the same way, because somebody's waiting. Waiting. But yeah, it is definitely a beautiful case that they go in, straight to this shack, as they mention, to help these two. So it's a beautiful thing.
And it's interesting, as soon as Assistant Silas, Andre Luiz, and Eladio get there, their reaction, because and we recommend you go and read the chapter, because they begin to talk about the scenery, and they're in a deplorable situation. Pollyanna and her son Sabino, they live in a shack. They are poor. They, by all material means, they are basically desolate, But we see that Pollyanna has a great heart. She really wants and is trying to help her son, even to stay alive, because they go there. Why?
Well, the situation that her health is very, very deplorable. She's in a really difficult situation, and it's beautiful, as we were talking about this condition of Silas being, again, touched by somebody and say, I need help. I need your help with this. So obviously this is a case as well, that these two individuals, they were helped from Mansell Paz in the past. So that's why they're under the guard of Mansell Paz, the watch care of Mansell Paz. But it's beautiful that they immediately go to the location to help her, because her health is very deteriorated. And Silas, in his condition as a doctor, as a friend, he's looking around trying to find something that he can help this soul, because they didn't have any means, and the areas that they say was very isolated. So there would be no time to wait for somebody, for an enlightened, incarnated soul to come and help. So what does he do? He sees that there's some water in the jar. If we can say, we could picture together some water in the corner of the house, and say, no, I'm going to utilize this water. And he actually induces her to be thirsty through passes, and then he magnetizes the water, bringing elements to the water that she can drink and she can benefit from it. And she does react to it. She does react to that situation, and it's beautiful, because the whole thing happens after a beautiful prayer that he brings. Right? And it's very interesting, because Andre Luiz then questions, and he says on page 175, you, the rich of earth, I thought to myself with tears, where is the power of your gold stuffed coffers before the simple radiance of a prayer? What is the greatness of your palaces of splendor and jewels when compared to one single minute of the soul's reverence in communion with God's paternity in the majesty of heaven? It's a beautiful thing that just in a little tiny bit of water, a prayer, he brings the rescue to this mother who is in a deplorable state. But there is something else that I think is very interesting. What about the sleep? They also mentioned the sleep.
Yes, because the water that Pollyanna drinks, it actually works as a sedative. immediately when she takes it, because she's full of anxiety. One of the reasons they say that when they go there, she has this cardiac arrhythmia, her heart is racing out of control, partly due to all her worries of being impoverished and having a very ill son. But they say once she drinks it, she's induced to calming down and then into a sleep, and of which Silas, along with Andre Luiz, they take her lovingly from her physical body to a nearby area where they could get from the resources from nature what they need. Because they're in her little shack, and we can imagine it was a little shack where there was a little bit of water, and that was it. There's nobody nearby to even, no incarnates nearby, even that they could inspire to help. So the best thing that they did was to take her from her body, and they utilized from the nature the resources that they need. Also, it's amazing. Once again, we see in this chapter the power of prayer. It is, we would say, Leo, highly underrated. Not just for Spiritists, but for as a humanity in general, we do not utilize probably enough. Perhaps it's because we don't understand the mechanism of prayer and its utility and its ability to make things change in our life. And Leo, we're not talking about moving physical mountains necessarily, but just our own selves. It's amazing, right?
Changing our thoughts, changing our behaviors. Because the situation where they find themselves now is simply something from the past that they created. And they're still living in this feeling. She, as the mother, has found what? Resignation.
Yes. And
given herself the ability to go ahead and make amends to the problems that she have done in the past, right? Correct the things that she has done during her past lives.
Right.
But we see that the son is not in the same situation.
Leo, that's interesting, right? The story of her son.
The story of her son. They have been connected for many, many years. And again, she has started in this path of resignation and repairing the things that she has done in the past. And the one thing that she's doing is helping the son, which in the past, who was that person? We don't want to give the story away, but just some highlights.
We want you to read the chapter. But Leo, one highlight we really wanted to bring, and it's interesting because it's so pertinent, because we try to, extract from the chapter how this is applicable in our own lives. Because her son is born physically and mentally disabled. He can't physically hear he can't hear. He basically, and he's also born, physically deformed, but they specifically say he was born as a dwarf. He's extremely short. His head is abnormally large and also disfigured. They say he resembles somewhat of of a primate. So they paint this picture that is very sad. So we can imagine, Leo, everyday life when mothers or parents or families have children or adopt children with such illnesses, we look and we might judge and say, oh, who's that spirit, or even judge the child and say, oh, that's a not nice looking child. But we see behind that sad child and the situation that physically he was born into is his redemption. Because the chapter is entitled Debt at a Standstill. And though we don't have the time to go into, nor do we really wish to go into fully the case of Sabino, we know that he is a debtor, a huge creditor to the law. And we're talking about hundreds upon hundreds of years he has been committing crimes. And what's interesting is that before he came into this particular lifetime, being born as a dwarf, to his accomplice in crime, which is his now mother, Pollyanna,
right.
They say that right when his previous incarnation, where he basically was sort of a suicide because of his addictions, at the moment when he was in the spirit realm and he began to feel bad, he felt this pain of remorse. The higher spirituality literally scooped him up, Andre Luiz said, and brought him and said, you know what? Now we need compulsory reincarnation. That is basically part of his case. They said he needs to go back. But why did he go back in the form of a dwarf? Because he needed to be encapsulated. Because they say that his vibrations that he would emanate, if his personality was able to come forth, would disturb not only the incarnates but the discarnates. It's interesting, right? Because
they also mentioned that he not only created debt for himself by doing wrong throughout his wrongdoings as an incarnate, but also in the spirit realm.
Yes.
So in both planes, we see that we can create issues and we can, create debt for ourselves in both sides. And it's a beautiful highlight as well. But mainly, why is he encapsulated in the body, as they say, this way? because of the self-centered thoughts, ideas that he had.
Yes.
As they analyzed the spirit, they saw that the emanations would just start from within and then go back for himself, thinking that he was it.
Yeah, to protect the incarnates and the discarnates from his emanations.
From an emanation. So it's amazing how we see here the beauty of the natural laws helping the soul to progress still in a very deplorable situation, but basically, if he were to have a regular body or a normal body, if we can say that way, not only he would get himself more in debt based on his self-centered thoughts, vanity, pride, the way he felt, the way he describes himself, because they connect with him. So we see that it's very crucial that when we see these cases, when we see these difficult moments, we pray for.
Right.
We help the best way we can without judgment.
Right.
Without
That's
judgment.
good. I'm glad you said that, Lou, because we don't want people to go away, take away from this particular chapter as a means to judge people who have children, who have mental illnesses, or born with deformities, to say, oh, your child must have been a criminal. That is not what Spiritism teaches us. Not at all.
Quite the contrary.
Quite the contrary. They teach us to be more compassionate, because that soul is merely on a path of redemption. That's it. We all are in different forms.
That is certainly correct. So we see with this case that, perhaps making sure that we, if anything that we can ask for God is courage, right? Just as the mother. She was in this very deplorable state. Somebody saw what was going on from Mansão Paz, prayed for her, asked for help. Silas comes and helps, and we see how protected we are, as well as vanity, right? The self-centeredness, all the things, all the vices that we bring from the back. Let us get rid of all these things.
You know what, Leo, too, before we wrap up, just two more things we wanted to bring from the highlight is that this spirit, Sabino, he came in this body also for have this time of reflection, but also we see within this chapter they talk about this utilization of the beauty of sleep. And in Spiritism we would call it intelligent sleep. The necessity, because who really thinks about that? Outside of Spiritism, we don't even hear about this intelligent sleep, the ability, because oftentimes we say, sleep, I don't do anything when I sleep. It's a useless time period other than for my physical body. When in actuality, Spiritism comes and says, if you pray with intent and ask to be assisted during your time of sleep, you will be assisted according to the laws and what's available to you, but you will. So it's just another tidbit we wanted our listeners to really take away, right?
Right. And with that, I mean, we can close by saying, if we're going through our tribulations or difficulties in our lives, let us then pray with intent. Let us open up our hearts and say, truly, I'm going through this moment. I don't know what it is. If we can find a cause in this lifetime, if we have mentioned here, let's look in the past, but without a judgmental way, even within ourselves, let alone for others. And if anything, let us get a drop of water and pray that perhaps, especially if it's something physical, that we can drink the water that will be magnetized by our mentors, the mentors of the house, bring our water to the Spiritist Center, and ask again for these guidance, for the spiritual nourishment that we all need, besides the things that we see here on earth, besides the treatment and the intelligent sleep. So if with that, we hope that we can bring some enlightenment in your lives. Read the chapter, and until next time, chapter 14.
Wish many blessings.